They are the detailed press conference by India to expose Pakistan's ways and what really happened last night. A couple of aspects that I'd like to focus on here. One, the fact that Pakistan and India has exposed this, of how Pakistan has used civilian aircraft almost as a shield to ensure the IF doesn't hit out at the drones. And so we had to exercise maximum restraint, and also the use of Turkish drones. We're going to be talking about that. Just take a look first at some of the highlights of that briefing.
On the intervening night of 8th-9th May 2025, Pakistan military carried out multiple violations of Indian airspace along the entire western border with an intent to target military infrastructure. Pakistan military also resorted to firing of heavy caliber weapons along the line of control. Along the international border and line of control, drone intrusions were attempted from Leh to Sar Creek at 36 locations with approximately 300 to 400 drones. Indian Armed Forces brought down a number of these drones using kinetic and non-kinetic means. Pakistan's irresponsible behavior again came to fore. Pakistan did not close its civil airspace despite it launching a failed unprovoked drone and missile attack on 7th May at 8:30 hours in the evening. Pakistan is using civil airliners as a shield, knowing fully well that its attack on India would elicit a swift air defense response. This is not safe for the unsuspecting civil airliners, including the international flights, which were flying near IB between India and Pakistan. Pakistan also carried out artillery shelling across the line of control using heavy caliber artillery guns and armed drones at Tangdhar, Uri, Poonch, Mendhar, Rajouri, Akhnur and Udhampur in Jammu and Kashmir area, which resulted in some losses and injuries to Indian Army personnel. Pakistan Army also suffered major losses in Indian retaliatory fire.
So let's just talk about that one aspect. Gaurav is with me. We've got senior journalist Sandeep Unithan also with us here in our studios. But just putting the focus really, Gaurav, on the fact that, India spoke about a civilian aircraft being used as a shield. How exactly did that happen? What happened last night?
So what happened was Pakistan targeted multiple locations in India. India fired countermeasures, but India could not take the kind of retaliatory action India could have because Pakistan has not closed its airspace for civilian flights. So this flight, an Airbus A320 flying from Dammam to Lahore, was flying with passengers in. So India exercised restraint. Had India fired a longer range missile, that civilian aircraft could have been in the line of fire and civilians could have been killed. So Pakistan, as always, uses civilians as a shield, and in this case it's risking lives of civilian passengers as it sends in drones and aerial projectiles into our country.
You contrast that, Sandeep, with India. Of course, we've closed off largely all airports in the north and west, keeping in mind this particular threat. You contrast that to Pakistan. So we understand that they timed the aircraft in such a manner to their strikes, essentially. And what this does is, I understand we can't fire back into Pakistani soil. We managed to intercept, but that's it.
Absolutely, Akshita. And that's what the game plan appears to be, that they, exactly like they say, how guerrillas operate among the people. And it becomes very difficult to target them. This seems to be the strategy over here, that they kind of engage from, between where commercial aircraft are flying, they launch drones from there, and retaliation becomes extremely difficult because you cannot target an area which is, filled with civilian passenger aircraft. It would be catastrophic, the consequences for that. But, quickly, one more point that the Foreign Secretary made, Akshita, about Pakistan deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure on our side of the border. They shelled a convent, they killed students, they targeted, other members of that convent, and they've targeted gurdwaras as well. And the Foreign Secretary, I have to agree with what he says. He says this is a new law even for Pakistan, targeting civilian infrastructure, targeting places of worship, convents and the like. So, I mean, I wouldn't put it past them what he described about using civilian aircraft as shields for what they are doing, striking against us, striking at our civilians all across this 3,000-kilometer boundary.
Yeah, and while they constantly continue to do that, mind you, India, in our response also, we've been very measured, and we've ensured that come what may, no matter what level of provocation really Pakistan resorts to, that's where we draw the line. We're not targeting civilian establishments. We're not targeting civilian settlements, come what may. And so despite these kind of provocations, India's been hitting back, countering only by hitting Pakistani military establishment. Just a quick word also from Munish Pandey on the point that was made by the MEA about what's happening along the LOC and the constant shelling come sunset in many parts along the LOC, Munish. That's very, very worrying, the way Pakistan has been resorting to targeting these civilian settlements, most of which now has been evacuated also as a measure now by our forces.
Absolutely, Akshita, and what we saw yesterday in the region of Jammu and nearby areas, that there were constant firing, not only through drones but also artillery firing, heavy shelling from Pakistan side, and it was not only limited to military establishment. It was targeted through civilian areas also, and that is very worrying because there is a line. Whenever there is a war, there is a line. Whenever there is such provocations also, then there is a line. But Pakistan has seen no line, it seems, and that is why they are not only targeting military establishment but also the civilian areas also. Also, one important point, Akshita, is that they sent more than 500 drones last night, and it becomes very difficult for any military establishment, be it any armed forces, to distinguish between those drones and a civilian aircraft. So India has acted very responsibly. Most of those drones were neutralized, but India could have done much better if that civilian aircraft was not in its way. But India has acted very responsibly, and what we have been given to understand is that most of the drones which were sent in the areas like Amritsar, Gurdaspur, Pathankot, those drones were neutralized successfully by the Indian Air Force.
So we managed to repel any attack by Pakistan, and I'll talk about really what India's counter looked like. We'll talk about that in just a bit, but first listen into some of the highlights of what the Foreign Secretary had to say.
The other point in the same vein is Pakistani claims that they did not target or attack any religious places. You would recall that yesterday I shared with you an incident related to the attack on a Gurdwara in Punch. Instead of owning up to these attacks, Pakistan made the preposterous and outrageous claim that it was the Indian Armed Forces and the Indian Air Force that was targeting cities like Amritsar and trying to put the blame on Pakistan. This is nothing but a desperate attempt by Pakistan to disown its acts of aggression, but it is also true to type in its effort to deceive and mislead the world. It will not succeed. The Gurdwara in Punch in particular was attacked by Pakistan, and some local members of the Sikh community, including a Ragi of the Gurdwara, lost their lives in this incident, as I shared yesterday. As we saw in the Pahalgam attack, Pakistan is again trying desperately to impart a communal hue to the situation with an intention to create discord. Again, we are not surprised. India's steadfast unity in itself is a challenge to Pakistan.
And so that's how the Foreign Secretary really exposed Pakistan, their dirty tricks. Quite expected, really, that they're also using civilians as a shield, targeting civilians in India and then using civilians as a shield as well. But let's also put the focus really on one question, the nature of counter that came in from India last night. Gaurav, what really was that about? Do we have any details of what kind of a counter-strike was launched by India last night?
So India has already made it very clear that India will not escalate, but in case there's any action from Pakistan, there will be a response and a definite response. So the response this morning has been taking out an air defense system of Pakistan. Even on day one, after Pakistan attempted to target multiple installations in India, India had taken out the HQ-16 air defense system, and that was in Lahore. This time again in Pakistan's Punjab, an air defense system has been taken down. Perhaps that's the one at the Okara cantonment, and this would indicate that systematically India is degrading Pakistan's war-fighting capabilities. When you take down a country's air defense system, it's not just the radar that's taken down. Often the missiles that come along with it are also either rendered ineffective, or Pakistan becomes night blind or blind in terms of the ability to respond. So India is systematically degrading Pakistan's war-fighting capabilities without escalating.
And by constantly, Sandeep, it seems targeting essentially Pakistan's ability to detect what's coming their way. And when we talk about what's happened in this counter-strike, like Gaurav said, you know, these radars that have been hit, how deep in Pakistan were they?
Oh, well, it wouldn't be deeper than about 50 kilometers, because Lahore is very, just across the border from Amritsar. So what, as Gaurav mentioned, what we seem to be doing is to chip away at their capabilities, degrade their capabilities, target their radars. Radars are very, very critical for air defense systems, because without radars, missiles are useless, guns are useless, they cannot see anything. If you can't see anything, you can't shoot at anything. So that's what India seems to be doing here, targeting radars, targeting air defense radars, because if and when an Indian retaliation comes, again, it's going to be from the air, it's going to be the Air Force, or it's going to be drones. And Pakistan, the fewer radars that Pakistan has, that are operational, the lesser are the chances of it intercepting an Indian airstrike or an Indian drone strike.